I'm Mike Costello, and I'd like to spend the next few minutes talking to you about creating a vision for your life. So often we think of vision as something that corporations or large organizations have, but in reality, we need a vision for our individual lives. And a vision is more than a dream, it's more than an aspiration. It's actually something that we see within our mind's eye. It is a view that we have of life and of the value of life and the direction in which we want to see our life moving. And so it's really important that we develop a vision for our life. And whether we realize it or not, each and every one of us have a vision. And that vision resides in our mind. In New Thought, we say very often that we live in our minds and not in the world. That means that we live in our thought processes, that as we think, so we interpret, assimilate, and come to know the world around us. And so we want to be very aware of the fact that our mind is creating the way that we see life, and that what goes on in our minds, in your mind, my mind, and in the minds of all of us, creates the way that we see the very experience of life. And so the importance of having a vision for life becomes much clearer when we understand and grasp the reality that we live in our minds. If your life is existing in your mind as it does, and mine as well, then that vision that we have of life, the vision that we have of our individual selves, and the vision that we have of the world around us is tremendously and preeminently important. It's important to remember that a vision is not a dream. It is a conscious awareness. It is a conscious sight that is not seen with human eyes, but that is seen and perceived with the mind, or the dynamic of mind action. It's a little bit like when we think of a pastoral scene, or beautiful mountains, or lakes, or a beautiful blue sky with birds flying across amid wonderful white clouds. We may not be seeing that actual vision or that actual sight with our eyes, but we can see it in our minds. And as we see that vision, as we visualize in our minds, then we come in tune with that which we're thinking, or about which we're thinking. And so it's very important to remember that your vision of life is determining the quality of your life, because as your mind acts and reacts to circumstances and situations, you have a vision. And your vision, in most cases, will be either positive or negative. Some of us have more positive impulses or tendencies than others. Others have more negative tendencies. And whatever it is that your vision is leaning toward, I would encourage you to build within yourself the positive aspects of vision and the positive aspects of ideation or thought. And if you build upon those positive aspects of thought, then those positive aspects of thought will participate with you in the experiences that you come to in your life. You have a vision, I have a vision, and our challenge is to have a positive vision of life, and to have that vision always resident within our conscious mind, so that every experience that we have and every day of our lives is lived amid the vision that we have in our mind's eye, more importantly than the vision that we have with our physical eye. Every one of us are going to be faced with challenges in our life. Every one of us are going to be faced with difficulties in our lives. And one of the dynamic things about New Thought is that it creates empowerment within us to condition our way of thinking, and by aligning our way of thinking with the divine mind of Spirit or of God, we can have a positive vision and a positive view of circumstances and situations. That doesn't mean that the circumstances and situations will always be as we want them, nor does it mean that those visions, that those circumstances and situations will be the outpicturing of life as we would like it to be. But the reality is that the experiences and the events that take place in your life and in my life and in the lives of all of us are there for us to grow through and to come to know better ourselves and our ability to cope with the realities of life. Whatever it is that is brought into your life, whatever it is that comes into your life experience, is exactly what you need to learn the lessons that you need to learn. That's a painful understanding for us to come to, but it is a real understanding that helps us to know, understand, and realize that life is a genuine and generous giver, and that as it gives us experiences and as events come into our life, that we have the opportunity to grasp those events and to learn from them and to grow through them and to glow through the experience. That glowing experience comes from the creation of a vision within your mind and within your heart that will empower you and allow you to deal with the circumstances and situations of life. All of us, or most of us, can deal with the easy situations in life without much effort. But it's the difficult challenges that perplex us, and it's the difficult challenges that we want to address and that we want to empower you to be able to deal with in a positive and affirmative way. And before we go any further, I want to make clear that we're not talking about denying the reality of the negative experiences, denying the reality of pain, of illness, of limit, of lack, or of any of the things that come into your life that present challenges. But what we do want to do is create within you the awareness that in the midst of these circumstances and situations, you can find a way through and a way out, and you can overcome any circumstance or situation, and that reality comes between and with a union of your mind with divine mind, your mind with the divine mind of infinite intelligence, the presence and the power of God. And we're not talking about your changing your religion or changing your belief system. We're asking you to consider a change in the way that you think. Whether you're a Methodist or a Muslim, a Catholic or Confucian, whatever it is that your faith tradition is, we want you to be good and strong in that faith, but empowered to deal with the circumstances and situations of daily life. I'd like to talk about a few practical methods of developing a vision for your life. And as we talk about these practical methods, we may be talking about some concepts and ideas that are new to you. And if they are, we invite you to open your consciousness, open your awareness, put aside your negative thinking or the thought processes that have been shared with you in the past, and embrace this kind of concept and try it and see if it begins to help you deal with the circumstances and situations of life. So a practical aspect or a few practical steps in creating a vision for your life begins with something that we call the silence. Some people may call it meditation. Other people may call it a variation of prayer. If you're not a particularly spiritual or religious person, you don't have to call it any of those. You can simply call it, as we do, the silence. And what you can do is to begin by going to a quiet place periodically in your life, perhaps every day, perhaps several times a week, perhaps as you begin this process of developing your vision for life, you'll only do it once a week or so. The more often you do it, the stronger you will become in this process. So the first step is to find a time when you can go apart and away from the busyness of life and enter the silence. The silence is no more than going to a comfortable chair, going into your bedroom and closing the door, perhaps in your office at some time during the day when you are able to eliminate the telephone calls and the interruptions, wherever it is that you can go to be apart. Maybe you can walk out into a park or into a quiet place, but find a place of quiet solitude. And that's difficult for us today, but it can be done. And there are infinite opportunities for finding a quiet place right where you work, right where you live. It doesn't have to be somewhere far away. But go to that quiet place. Allow yourself to be comfortable for a few moments. Allow yourself to simply enter into a silent time. And as you do this, allow yourself to close your eyes, allow yourself to take some deep and cleansing breaths, and allow yourself to simply be in silence. That may sound strange, but for most of us, we don't spend any time in silence, or we spend too little time in silence. If you're a person who prays, we're talking about something completely different here. We're talking not about having dialogue with God or about needs. We're not talking about that at all. We're talking about a silence, a period of silence. Whether it's contemplation or whether it's simply being quiet, doesn't matter. Enter the silence. So that's step number one. Begin a mode of setting aside time each day or each week to enter the silence. Come to a comfortable place, do some deep and cleansing breathing, and just enter into a quiet time with your eyes closed, not thinking about anything, clearing your mind. One of the things that a teacher of mine used to say was, we need to put our mind in neutral. And very often we don't put our minds in neutral ever. So we need to put it in neutral, not in park, for those of you who can drive, but to put it in neutral. Let your motor continue to run, continue to be awake and alert, but just be quiet. Just enter into the silence. As you enter into the silence, in the beginning, perhaps it'll just be a few moments. Later, allow it to be 30 seconds, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and get yourself to a point where you enter the silence for a period of at least several minutes. As you enter the silence and you stay and remain in that state, breathing easily, consciously, cleansingly, releasing the tensions and the stress of the day, the stress and tension of your life, and just being in that quiet moment, begin to listen. Don't begin to participate. Don't begin to expect. Don't dialogue. Simply be in that silence and listen. And as you listen, there will come to you thoughts. Some people may even hear it as an inner voice. It will be a voice, it will be knowledge that is given to you, not with a spoken word, and not with words that we've come to know with our ears, but it will come with an inner knowing. And as you do that, allow that silence to speak to you, and allow that inner voice, that inner presence that resides within you always to speak to you, and open yourself to the possibility of its presence. As you open yourself to the possibility of the presence of this infinite within you, and as you enter into a silent time, and as you come apart, then this spirit, this presence, this reality will speak to you. As it speaks to you, it will guide you and direct you in the way that your mind should operate and how the vision of your life should be. As you develop this process, which is a technique of meditation, you will, in the process, come to understand and realize things about yourself. You will also be guided and directed in ways that you would have never imagined. Remember, we're not talking about entering this silence, coming into this experience once a day or several times a week so that you can get answers to questions that you're placing or that you're making. Instead, you're opening yourself to answers from the infinite to create for yourself a vision from which and through which you can see all of life and all of life's experiences. Everything in this life brings us change. Every circumstance and situation that you experience brings us change, brings you change and me change and each one of us. And it is through change that we grow. And even though some of the changes are difficult and painful, it is infinitely important that we embrace the reality of the experience in which we find ourselves and that we create for ourselves a vision to deal with circumstance and situation. If you will enter into the silence, if you'll develop the ability to create for yourself a vision, not of your creation, but that comes from your inner knowing, from your inner strength and from your inner abilities, then you will see magnificent things happening in your life, and you will see a vision beginning to develop within you that will allow you to be empowered and strengthened to deal with all the circumstances and situations of life. When this happens, when you create this inner knowing and this connectiveness to infinite intelligence, the vision that it gives you will become your rudder for your life experiences. It will become the steering instrument that allows you to navigate the circumstances and situations of life. That inner presence, that vision of life is waiting for you to answer all of your needs. But in order for it to answer your needs, in order for you to have a true vision for your life, in order for you to embrace the positive and deal with everything that comes, you must have trust in yourself and you must have trust in the presence and the power of God. And if you have that trust in yourself and in the presence of God, and if you allow yourself to unite with that presence through the simple exercise of entering the silence, then the vision that you need, the guidance that you need, and the direction that you need will be given to you. And vistas and doorways and thoughts and actions and ways will be opened that you could never have imagined before. And I want to impress upon you that this has nothing to do with what you believe or don't believe. It has nothing to do with whether you're a good person or a bad person. It has nothing to do with anything that you need to earn or learn or come to know. It is simply something that is freely given, accessible, and available to everyone if we simply open ourselves in the silence to the vision that the presence and power of God has for you. We believe in prayer as a centering force, and we'd like to pause at this point in the program and invite you to join with us in a reflection. Eternal and loving God, we gather our hearts and minds together in the divine reality of your presence. And as we do this, we open ourselves to the vision that you have for us and for our lives. And as we open ourselves to your divine vision and presence, we are receptive to that which you bring to us, the healing and the grace and the strength. And we know these things in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in the name of love. Amen.
That was wonderful advice that you gave and information. And if everyone would follow that advice, we would be a kinder, gentler nation.
And I think we develop vision.
Yeah.
And I think so often the point of what I was talking about is we think so often that vision is something that we have to plan and strive for and struggle for. Or sometimes we think that we don't even have vision, when in fact we have a vision, whether we know it or not. But it's so much more wonderful if we would connect with the divine presence within, if we would open ourselves to that and then allow it to guide us and direct us.
Yes, then we're living from our higher self in that way. And it's what you said is just so very true, that it's remarkable that more people don't just know that this is what we're to do.
Well, and it's so simple. And I think that today it's very difficult, and I think that's one of the challenges that we have in our movement in New Thought. Yeah. It's very difficult to convince people how simple and easy spirituality can be, because we've come through centuries and centuries of heavy theology. And that's not to say that theology is bad. I myself find a lot of theology very boring, but theology and spirituality, just like religion and spirituality, are two very different things. And I think we confuse ourselves in our minds and we decide that we're a Catholic or a Baptist or a Presbyterian or a New Thoughter or a Hindu or whatever it is that we are. And that brings along a lot of baggage in terms of what we have to do in order to gain God's favor and to live a happy life. And what we continue to say is that all of that is really excess baggage, and there are some very simple things. And if we would simply embrace the presence of God, whoever we are, wherever we are, then we'd be guided and directed.
Yeah, always. And we just have to look, and it's there. The information is there. And you so often say, and so do a lot of other people, we create our own reality. Well, I don't know if, I hope our audience realizes that they do indeed create their reality, and they create the unpleasant things in their lives just as well as they do the pleasant things, because reality is all in all.
Mm-hmm. And reality is directly related to how we respond in mind.
Yes.
And so many of us are so negative in mind.
Too much so, too often. But those who have learned to live with the positive aspect of being will never go back to the negative way, because they learn how much more rich and wonderful life is. Another good thing that you pointed out is that whenever we have adversity facing us, then we can learn from that adversity, and we can know that we created that through our thoughts, and so it's for a reason. So instead of fighting and struggling, then if we just look to see, what lesson am I to learn here? And also, when other people oppose us, when we have family members or in the workforce, there's someone who we just can't get along with, and they just irritate us to death. Well, if we would just realize that that is teaching us a lesson, we'd be far ahead.
And not spend a lot of time in the experience.
Yes.
So often we spend time, we want to know why it happened. We want to know what caused it. And I think even spiritual or religious people are guilty of that, maybe more so. But so often to a secular person with no religious background or spiritual leanings, when they get into a negative experience, they will build upon it by rehashing it, talking about what caused it, who said what, who did what.
Yeah.
And instead of, as you said so well, understanding that every experience has brought us an opportunity.
Yeah.
And now what's the opportunity that this has brought to me? And kind of step out of the experience.
Yes. But before we step out to look for that vision and see, what am I supposed to have learned from this? So we see what it triggers within us, and then see what aspect of that of our lives we need to change or wish to change. And if we just look at it objectively like that, we can see what the changes are that we need to make.
And we can short circuit the hurting.
Yes,
And that's
exactly.
key, because that hurting, that pain, if we rehash it and we live through it and we analyze it and we go through it, but instead begin to look at what it is that this is teaching me. The other thing that I think is tremendously important that I touched upon in the talk is something that's very common to us in our movement, and we understand it, but a lot of people don't, is the silence.
Yes,
And I think even for many in New Thought, we understand meditation a little bit.
yeah,
We understand prayer somewhat, but the silence is it is a type of meditation, but it is a type of meditation, I think, that even those who meditate use too little,
yeah,
because we may use it to enter our time of meditation, or we may use it at a point in time to deal with stress briefly, but we really don't think about the silence and how easy that is to enter.
yes, because too often we're busy thinking of the mechanics of how am I doing? What am I supposed to be silent? Am I supposed to be, what am I supposed to be doing? So our mind is busy, and that we're not in silence when our mind is busy.
Mhm.
And so we can't keep that busy mind and have everything clicking along and be silent.
Mhm. One of the things that I do in business often is that if I'm at a board meeting or at a committee meeting and there's a conflict or strife or there's something, I'll enter the silence sitting there at the table.
Yeah.
And, so often people will think, well, you have to close your eyes and you
Mhm.
have to. I think those things are certainly preferable if they're available, but we can enter the silence anywhere.
Yes.
And it really has to do with coming apart from what's going on around us and entering into this quiet time.
And if we could see what's happening, if we could clairvoyantly see what's happening, I guarantee what you would see is this tube of light going through our bodies, up through the center of our head and up, and then it just goes right on out into infinity and connects with Creator God.
And that creative power and presence is available to us always, isn't
Yes,
it? Yeah.
yes. And when we're living from our high self, then we're living in that modality, and we can get answers to things, and we can get nudges of what we need to do. And we think that it has to be something great and glorious and big and mammoth. It doesn't. It's just day-to-day living.
Mhm. And that's key too. Most of our life is spent in day-to-day living. And, we do want to be involved in the magnificent so
Yeah.
often, but most of our lives are spent in the magnificent moments
Yes.
of small experiences.
Yes. And kindness and gentleness has so much to do with how other people are able to get into that modality. Because if we're pushing someone mentally, then they're not able to relax and get into that. So I think humanity as a whole, the consciousness has risen to the point that more and more people are able to do that constructively and well, don't you?
I believe so. And
Yeah.
and of course, what we're about is inviting more people
Yes.
to do that, but to create that awareness of consciousness. And I think that's a whole topic in and of itself,
Yeah.
because we have to understand that we operate in consciousness, and that's the unseen thought processes that take place.
Yes. Well, your message is very, very timely because, as you said, more and more people need to be aware. And if they're just reminded, then they will go into that modality. And to me, it's just very thrilling to see more people and see the young people, the very, very young people, talk about meditation. And I've heard so many young people mention that they meditate, and they go into a certain kind of silence, or they wouldn't think they're meditating.
Mhm. And so many, after they begin the process of meditation or begin the process of entering the silence, find it to be so inviting and so comfortable that they do it with more frequency and with more positive results.
Yeah. Well, I think that the lessons you just gave, the points you made, if everyone would follow those points, then it would indeed be a different world. And we are creating a different world today.
Very important. Let's talk about that, because we are creating with our minds, aren't
Yes,
we?
yes,
Always.
yes. And we create what we think. We are what we think. And there's Victor H. Lindlar wrote a book years ago, You Are What You Eat. Well, we are indeed what we think.
Mhm.
And if we think harsh thoughts of other people, then it boomerangs back to us and affects us. And the people who have an open countenance and a happy look and a bright look, Those are the people you know who are quiet at times and have their communion with Creator God.
And they have a vision.
Yes.
And that vision always transcends what is taking place around them.
Yes. And we can consciously create a vision of positive aspect in our lives if we don't already. And it works the same way, whether we do it deliberately and consciously or whether it's just our way, our modality of living. It works either way, but it works. And if someone would just try one day of just being non-judgmental. I remember one time you had a sermon that said, just try for one day to be non-judgmental, and most of us didn't get out the door before we were able to break that rule. But if we would do that, it makes a difference.
Absolutely. And to just be able to participate in life as it comes and as it presents itself,
Yes.
and then to do something inside us, because life happens inside us.
Yes, that is such an important point that life happens inside us, and you say that so well, so often. But if we would just do that consciously, for just consciously not be negative, consciously have our positive vision, then we could see in one day the difference it makes in our lives, and we're happier, less tired at the end of the day, and more relaxed and feel better about ourselves and about life. And we also don't judge other people harshly because we see that everyone is doing the best they can and they don't know any better as a rule.
And absolutely true. Everyone is doing the very best that they can. And by creating a vision for life, Dr. Freelander and I have been sharing with you concepts and ideas of how it is that you can enter the silence, create your own vision, and begin to live a more confident life. And we hope that the information we've shared with you has been useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Living cleanses my soul, giving the spirit fullest control. Confident living rights every wrong. Dynamic power helps me be strong. Confident living comforts my heart. From such a blessing I can't depart. Confident living helps me expand visions of value, the kingdom at hand.